After 67 years of an extraordinary reign, Ramses the Great died in his palace in the Delta. Ramses' actual tomb has been the victim of both tomb robbers and severe flooding from the occasional downpour in the Valley of the Kings. But it's still worthy of Ramses the Great. The burial chamber is the largest in the Valley of the Kings and probably contained the greatest treasure ever assembled. Ramses had 67 years as king of the wealthiest country on earth to gather the gold and treasures he would take with him to the next world. This room undoubtedly held treasures far more spectacular than those of a young pharaoh like Tutankhamun. By the time Ramses died, most of the men who worked on the tomb were already dead. Ramses had reigned for 67 years. For most Egyptians, he was the only king they had ever known. When Ramses finally ascended to the gods, Egypt wept. But the mummy of Ramses did not remain in his tomb forever. Discovered by archaeologists in the last century, it was taken to Cairo, but this was not Ramses' final journey. In the 1970s, Egyptian curators discovered that the pharaohs in the Cairo Museum's mummy room were dying a second death. The humidity in the museum had allowed bacteria and fungi to attack the mummies for nearly a century. The mummy of Ramses the Great was sent to Paris to be studied and treated by a team of scientists. When Ramses arrived at the French airport, he received a full military reception, as befitted a visiting head of state. Ramses' mummy was examined by a team of scientists at the Museum of Man in Paris. The X-ray of Ramses' skull shows teeth that are badly worn, decayed. There's a hole in the jaw caused by dental infection. An abscess around his teeth was serious enough to cause death by infection, a condition that Egyptian physicians had no way of treating. We can't be sure that this is what caused Ramses' death, but it's a good bet that the great man's last days were spent in agony. Ramses died in pain, a crippled old man nearing 90. But the ancient Egyptians believed that in the next world he would be restored and young again. I like to think of Ramses somewhere in the west, riding out from the Delta Palace in his chariot, the army stretching for miles behind, setting off for new conquests. And when he returns, his beloved Nefertari is waiting to meet him with a couple of dozen of his kids. And as they gather round him, Ramses tells them of his victories and adventures. There were 11 kings of Egypt named Ramses, but there was only one, Ramses the Great.